Thank you very much. I will take...
All right, Mr. Root, thank you. Really good presentation. Going to open it up to council. Questions? Vice Mayor?
No, great presentation. I would expect nothing less from a Georgia Tech grad. Being one myself, although I was a management guy, organic chemistry would have kicked my rear. So,
All right.
but no, great presentation. I think I really appreciate that. Let me get your impression of our green print. Is it kind of a model that many other communities could get behind, or is there something out there that we need to be doing that our green print doesn't address?
I saw both versions of Greenprint, the 2011 when it first came out, the original one, and as well as the draft of the updated one. And what I particularly like is that you are stressing education and awareness, right? So much like when people say, well, how efficient is my car? You know, what MPG will I get? How efficient is my building? And really, it's the person behind the wheel that partly can influences that a lot, behavioral changes. So by stressing education and awareness, which I think you guys are doing a fabulous job of doing so, and thanks for the opportunity today, I think you're almost halfway there in some sense. And then you're looking at efficiency measures, you're looking at water conservation opportunities as well. So I think from what I can see right now, it's quite coherent. And I'll be spending time with Sheridan today to go through it in a little bit more detail. So yes, and I see other cities, whether it's City of Atlanta, City of Charlotte, and others, they have similar measures too. Yeah, so I think it's a great document from what I can see.
Well, talking about solar, I know the first generation, early generations of solar panels, those panels are very difficult to recycle or almost unrecyclable. How much progress are we making or is being made in the production of the newer panels as far as recyclable? And because I know the early ones were almost like you're addressing one issue but you're creating another one with their inability to be recycled. Where are we headed on that?
That's a great question, and a lot has changed. A decade is a long, they say, you know, a week is a long time in politics. Well, 10 years is a long time in energy. A year is a long, actually, as we witnessed in Texas, a week is a long time in energy too. But a lot has changed indeed. In fact, if I may bring out some of my reference slides on this right here, just to give you a visual as to what's going on in terms of the environmental impact. I'd like to address that both from an environmental impact, but also in terms both the full life cycle, from the start to the finish. And because solar has really taken its stride in the last 20 years, I would say there's been a lot more visibility about what's called life cycle analysis, full cycle, right? It's great that it creates energy, but what does it do for the environment? So there are really two questions that could be asked. Does the clean energy generated from the solar panels, modules, negate or offset the negative impacts during the mining and manufacturing process? Let's be honest, quite often solar modules are produced using fossil fuels. Okay? Without fossil fuels, we wouldn't have any solar. It's plain and simple. Okay? But although they are now like the Gigafactory in Nevada, Tesla, they want to run the whole facility on solar by putting modules on their rooftop. So the second question is, how does solar power's emission intensity compare to traditional electricity fuel sources such as coal? And then finally, the third question is the one that you asked. What do we do about all of this at end of cycle? Can they be recycled? So the short answer is yes. It's yes, yes, yes to all of this in the sense that we've come a long way. So what do solar modules consist of? Essentially aluminum, silicon, glass, and silver or copper. So those 4 or 5 materials, if you will. We know how to manufacture them very well today. right? And we've gotten really efficient at doing so. We also know how to recycle them. In fact, on a battery space, lead-acid batteries are 97% recycled in the United States. We are getting there, nowhere quite close to that with solar modules, but we are getting there now as well. So in fact, there are PV recycling processes. So there are plants for solar, and others within the US and around the world are setting up plants. Companies realize that at the end of 20, 25 years, you've got to do something about this. Okay. Now, the thing is, after 25 years, the solar modules are still producing 80% of their power. So they could be repurposed. Remember, we went from the 3 R's, reuse, reduce, and recycle, but repurpose. Rethink and repurpose. So we are looking to deploy those solar modules in developing nations and other places too. But if you truly want to recycle them, here's the process for doing so, outlined right there on the screen. And here's a factory in the United States, one factory of many. This website called recyclepv.solar talks just about that. Are we where we need to be? No, we are not where we need to be. Okay, but we are getting there. Just like we did with lead-acid batteries, which have been around for more than 100 years, we're getting there now with solar. And silicon, glass, aluminum, copper, silver, they're all valuable resources and can be recycled. In terms of the energy payback, you use fossil fuels to create these solar modules. Well, it takes around, here it is, energy return, cumulative net clean energy payoff, that's what it's called. Back around in 2004, the estimate was around 4 or 5 years. That has come down to 2 to 3, perhaps even less, 1 to 2 years. The energy you put in to create those solar modules, by operating those solar modules, and this particular chart, of course, is based on where you operate it. This one was European-centric, but similar in the United States. That is, as you operate those solar modules in the southern U.S., it takes around 1 to 2, maybe even 3 years to pay back that energy, which are still operating up to 80% after 25 years. Okay, so that's a good thing for that. Carbon emission intensity of solar modules, and this shows a relative carbon emission intensity right there. That is going down considerably as well, because the efficiency of those modules in the last 10 years has almost doubled. We're at 20% plus. Now you'll say, well, 20% efficient? Well, that's a pretty low number. Well, you were just telling me the electric car can be 70 to 80% efficient. But the thing is, remember, the fuel is free. So the efficiency matters, and it doesn't matter per se. What matters much more is the capacity factor. You can't dispatch solar. So yes, coal produces 20 to 25 times more carbon dioxide, CO2, than solar energy in terms to produce the same amount of energy when you factor in all the manufacturing. So these are the numbers. And the references, by the way, in the slide deck, all the references, a lot of the information is from the Energy Information Administration, EIA, of the US. And you'll see all the references so you can see whether they're biased or not, and if they're impartial. I tried to go to impartial sources, plus based on my own experience. So yes, the short answer, we're doing stuff about it, and we're getting there, and we have plans that are coming. But it is an issue that needs to be addressed. And so for that matter, energy storage, lithium batteries, the same thing applies for lithium batteries as well. So, and we are looking into recycling and repurposing lithium batteries. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
Councilmember Beckman?
Thank you so much for being here. I just love this topic. I hear about it every single day. I'm married to a man who this is what he lives and breathes. But I had a couple of questions about the slides, and one was about that 24% with solar, because I'm thinking, is that is our number in Florida a little higher? It's the capacity factor one, 24.9% solar. And, you said, it's because we're beholden to Mother Nature and all that. So I guess if we're beholden to Mother Nature, it would never be more than like 50% because the sun's only out half the time, right? I mean, so might it be a little higher in Florida, or is that just like an average, or what?
That's an average U.S.-wise, I should say. And it is somewhat higher, but I do not see that number ever being higher than even like 34% or so
Okay.
in the U.S. While you may have sometimes 12-hour sunlight days, that 12 hours is not evenly distributed in terms of sunlight. You have a certain window. So you'll still have, it will never compete with natural gas in terms of capacity factor,
Okay.
where you have 50, 56% and plus. But you can change that by putting in energy storage. You can almost have any capacity factor you want. So, and typically 4-hour, 2-hour, 4-hour, and 8-hour, what they call energy storage systems, are what utilities are putting in now to get us to that.
And along with that storage, I was thinking about the duck curve. And so I have solar on my roof. I power my car and my home exclusively with that solar, the 16 panels. But I need Duke Energy in the middle of the night, right? Because I don't plug in my car battery, even though it is storage. And during a hurricane, I have run a cord out to the car to power the refrigerator, so, when we lost energy. But with that duck curve, and when the demand increases when people get home from work, that's where we, like you were saying, we can have battery storage. Our vehicles will eventually be our big battery storage, right? 20 years from now, everybody's got battery storage in their EVs. But also, and I didn't know if you had this somewhere in a slide that had a little bit more on your reference, but we can also incentivize people to use, with smart thermostats, with smart appliances, to turn on the dishwasher or the washing machine on those low duct areas, right, before. And so the consumption isn't always when we get home from work and are using everything, right? So we can do some of that.
Sure.
And then I had the other thing I think, to sum it up, is that it's super complex, and having natural gas as a base, so it's consistent and reliable, is great. And we can have solar to embellish that and help offset our carbon emissions. But as time goes on, the dependency on that natural gas, right, should decline a little bit as we improve technology and our use of solar and other renewables.
That's right.
Right? And so because of that, and the energy efficiency, so we spend over $7 million a year on electricity in the city. And your graph with that red about energy efficiencies, which for me, personally, it's been things like LED lights. I hang out my laundry, you have a programmable thermostat, and all that behavior that doesn't really cost much to change. That's where I think our city has a big opportunity to save money. And I'm wondering if it would be wise to consider hiring like a energy manager for the city. St. Pete has one, and our county has one, as far as managing all the complexity of, some of your later slides and decision making.
That's a good point. I'm a little bit cautious to directly answer that. It's something the council has to answer directly. I think there's a great merit in doing so. I think you've taken a tremendous step with Greenprint and understanding the landscape of what you're doing right now. And as you saw, there are many opportunities. How do you integrate them together? What are the opportunities for solar? We're doing a feasibility study, of which we are very excited to be working to have that opportunity to do so as well. So yes, I think, but that's something that should be discussed amongst the council members. I think there's a great opportunity there to do so. Yes.
Because I think with Greenprint, and as we look at it in the next couple of months, and I would advocate for some pretty aggressive carbon reduction goals, that's where an energy manager would not only help us save money, right, but also reach those goals the way we want to approach them.
What has been the feeling amongst the council so far going towards that possibility, if you're at liberty to discuss?
I'm not.
Okay. Got it.
Bill, what?
Well, no, this is the proper place to discuss it. I don't know if it's the proper time.
Got it. Yes.
But yeah, would that be something we could look into? What would it mean to hire a city manager? I mean, not city, I know, an energy manager in the city to coordinate some of those kinds of things?
The note that I made to myself is that that's an appropriate topic for your strategic planning discussion
Okay,
that you have.
okay. And do you see our over $7 million electric bill as a means to do the energy efficiencies and really bring that down?
Yes, I think you've already done a fair amount or some amount already in terms of LED lighting. It's the street lights, more and more LEDs, and so on. In terms of demand charge DSM, demand regulation, all of that stuff. So yes, I think there are. I don't want to commit to a number whether you can get that down to an additional 20-25%, but it is, you've identified the low-hanging fruit already. Now you need to look at what are the HVACs, heating and cooling systems. That's another huge opportunity throughout the city, while still maintaining comfort, because nobody's going to do this if they're not comfortable inside the place. So looking at mechanical systems, looking at systems that have newer and more efficient fans, that's called right timing. You need to do so when you're nearing end of cycle or nearing the cycle of an HVAC system. You're looking to upgrade, that's a great opportunity to come in and say, well, look at this other appliance. Can we downsize even in some cases? So yes.
But sometimes it seems like it would be better economically to make that decision before the end of life. If you can really save money by changing out these light bulbs and not waiting for them to go out and changing an LED, it makes more sense financially to change them now, waiting, and as opposed to waiting for them to burn out. Some things are like
If
that.
you do a cost-benefit analysis, what's the cost to change something out before it's even less than 50% of its lifespan compared to operations costs? One of the things we're seeing with newer equipment is that the operations and maintenance costs, the maintenance cost is less too. Things are just lasting longer. LED lifespans could be upwards of 50,000 to 100,000 hours potentially as well. So yes, I don't want to do a blanket statement. One of our favorite answers as engineers or architects is it depends. It depends. I'd want to do a cost-benefit analysis. A blanket statement would be yes. A more honest statement would be it depends, and let's look at what's going on in that building.
And I would think that's where an energy manager who has expertise would really help us make the best decisions.
I would hope so. Yes, I would hope so. Something you pointed out, and this is perhaps a little bit of an intellectual curiosity, not that I'm ever subject to that apparently, but in terms of transition of fuels, we went from solid fuels to liquid fuels to gas fuels. So if you look at, here's a reference slide right here for renewable energy, or rather energy in general. In Nevada, I found this one in particular. So over 10 years ago, you could see there was or 15 years ago, a transition from coal as a solid fuel, to now even to in between perhaps as a liquid fuel, but specifically a gas, right, natural gas. So what we've been seeing over time, that they've been from wood and coal to oil, petrol, to now gas. And then the next revolution would be, well, can we move on from even gas fuels already? And we are seeing that transition. So we can see in a short period of time, an entire state transitioned over. So what's going to happen with natural gas is that the more cost-effective microgrid systems become, energy systems become, the more reliable and dispatchable that they are, there's an opportunity to combine together with natural gas systems, and you will see that natural gas curve go down over time.
Anything else?
I think I'm good right now, thanks.
Councilmember Bunker?
Terrific presentation. Thanks so much. The one thing that I wanted to talk about Councilmember Beckman just brought up the energy manager. It seems to make a lot of sense to me, at least. It seems like the position would pay for itself. Be good to have somebody just tackling that on a daily basis. The other thing that that I believe in, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a day we're not taking action is a day wasted. Shouldn't we be doing something to make the change now?
I think you've kind of already answered that question. Yes, I think. But let me be clear. Yes, a day when you're not taking action is a day wasted. But a day in which you're taking action that's not based on awareness and true understanding is also a day wasted. You want to make sure that when you do take action, at some point you really understand what's going on, which you are doing with Greenprint and the like. So action in itself is fantastic and required, but it must be based on true understanding and awareness of what's going on. So yes.
Yeah. So implementing those studies that we're doing and hopefully getting an energy manager and all these steps, I would consider taking action. And I'd like us to get on that as soon as we can. Understanding we're already doing quite a bit.
That's a very good statement, going back all the way to 2011. So I don't want anyone to misconstrue that. Anything else?
No.
Okay. I'm not done.
Okay.
I always get to go last for the most part. So, first of all, thank you for all of this. Very educational. The supporting slides that you used, those did not come through on our presentation. At least I could not open them.
Okay.
We got those last minute and they will be sent to you all immediately after.
Okay, and there's also some slides that you had in your presentation that were not in ours. So I'd like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, if we could go back to slide 16. At least my slide 16.
Which would be
The solar construction costs, a comparison.
right. The ROI.
No, keep going.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I think
That's all right.
No, down further up.
There you go.
Okay.
So let me ask you on this. We've had a lot of discussions about whether we put solar panels on individual buildings, some as small as 100 square feet, by the way, versus participating with our utility, Duke, that is doing large-scale solar that we could invest in. If you were up here making decisions for the city, would you do solar on individual buildings? Would you support Duke Energy's initiative? Or would you find a localized area within the city of Clearwater where we could do a large array?
I think you can guess my answer. Not just it depends.
I don't want to guess.
No, but the point is all of them. I would do all of them. I would look at we have the means of doing an economic analysis on real numbers on buildings. I would look at specific rooftops that have good surface area without much shading, etc. And I would do an analysis on them, which can be done relatively quickly. I think rather than making a blanket statement to say let's do all the buildings or do none of the buildings, is let's look at them clustered group by group. We identify perhaps the key 5 or 10 buildings throughout, the opportunities, particularly parking lots maybe, flat roof systems, etc. And let's do an analysis. We can do that relatively quickly. What will it cost to put that in? What's the electrical system like? Look at all of that. And then do a life cycle, or rather a payback analysis. If it's under 10 years, is that good? Will that work? If it's over 25 years, maybe that won't work. So I would do select rooftop buildings. I would look at parking lot opportunities. I would look at clear ground opportunities as well. And I would talk and work with Duke Energy Florida too. So yes, to all of that.
Would there be a minimal critical mass, square footage? I don't understand why you wouldn't do the most efficient application.
Right.
Mathematically,
Of
I've
course.
got an MBA. I don't know why you wouldn't follow the most efficient manner to, install anything. So help me with that, because it doesn't make logical sense to me.
I completely agree with you. And the most efficient manners, okay, we're not comparing apples to apples. When you put a rooftop on a building, you are directly offsetting potentially more expensive energy that's used right then and there. When you're putting it on a solar park or a ground mount, your avoided cost there could go down as such. So the closer you are to your load, the more opportunities there are in terms of ROI, in terms of payback. So there's less transmission losses, you're creating the energy and using it right then and there. So it's not just a matter of looking at saying, okay, this is what, even though it costs more on a rooftop, your payback actually may be less and in some sense more efficient. So these apples and oranges and mangoes are not all the same. So we need to identify the most efficient from a category of rooftop, the most efficient from a category of parking lots, and the most efficient from category of ground mounts or connection directly with Duke Energy. So I would separate them rather than lump them together and look at the most efficient within each of those categories.
So if we decided that we want to produce a megawatt, and I'm just pulling a number, of solar electricity within the city,
Right.
you still believe you would put it in different places rather than if we could produce it in one single place
Yes.
and put it back into the grid?
Or consume it locally.
Mm-hmm.
Consume it. Whatever you can consume locally has a greater payback period, or let me rephrase that, has a greater opportunity in terms of return on investment. Because you're offsetting more expensive electricity.
So I'm assuming because you're on staff with McKim and Creed, you do this.
We do this, in fact.
Okay.
We have the ability, as you've seen right here, in terms of looking at different, where was it right here? Here we go. In looking at, what you really want to do is look at your internal rate of return, your net present value, you look at your payback period, and look at your levelized cost of electricity. So yes.
So how could we get a payback period from a reputable architect that said that our police substation in Countryside was going to have a 24-year payback
When was this done?
6 weeks ago?
I can help with that one. So if Sol hasn't been sent that information, that project is a little...
Come up to the microphone, Sharon,
That
please.
project is a little more unique, and so I can send you, if you're curious to see it. That project is a little more unique with the standards that the building is being built to at Cat 5. So a lot of that cost is the infrastructure to support the panels and making
Right.
sure that they're not on the building because we wanted to avoid roof penetrations.
Right.
So they're actually making their own Cat 5
Oh.
canopy over the parking garage. So that's probably what we assume increases the price quite a bit, and it makes it a
Okay.
little more of an oddball project.
Sure, I would love to have a look at that
Yeah.
though. So a canopy similar to like what you saw on the living building, which I showed, that is not attached to the building, but actually above it.
It's actually over the parking lot, not the building
the
itself.
parking lot,
And
okay.
the structure would be built to Category 5 standards.
Okay.
Because the police department was concerned reasonably that they don't want a structure that's not built to Category 5 standards, because if the building is standing great, but if none of the vehicles can get out because the structure has collapsed, that's not going to help them out.
Got it.
So that's why that project is a little more unique compared to some of the other projects that Sol is seeing.
Sure, sure. But I will look into that. Thank you, Councillor Hibbert, for bringing that up.
I'm the mayor.
Sorry.
What happens if there are too many microgrids to the overall utility. If we started producing, for instance, Morton Plant has their own generation plant. What if there are too many microgrids so that it undermines the system of the utilities? I'm just curious over time.
Sure.
And then in an emergency, when everyone needs that overarching grid, what happens?
It's actually quite the opposite. During Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey, Northeast, some time ago, it were the microgrids that actually supported the local grid when the grid went down. So there's no such thing as too many microgrids. What you need is intelligence, the ability to control and regulate those microgrids. And utilities are often involved in large microgrids to ensuring that to be the case as well. So I would actually argue it's the opposite, because it is another resource that the utility has to be able to dispatch power where it's needed in terms of the fire stations, in terms of the local infrastructure itself, where it's being consumed. So University of San Diego worked in conjunction, I think it was San Diego Electric, to create a large microgrid that's just ever expanding, that actually was a benefit to the utility and is expanding even further right now. So I wouldn't say you can have too many. I think what you want to ensure that each of those microgrids is done compliant to standards, compliant to what the utility dictates as well, to make sure that it can be fed into the utility properly and dispatched when the utility needs so in the case of emergency, to provide resiliency to the city. So it doesn't actually undermine, it works in conjunction, in harmony with the utility. So, but I think you had something else in mind.
I'll check that with somebody else.
Sure,
I
sure.
just think it's interesting if 95% of the time the microgrids are utilizing their own energy. If there's an emergency, you're talking about reducing load significantly. At some point, there's got to be a decision by a utility that they're not going to continue to invest because the microgrids are basically eating at their market share.
So to be clear, a microgrid is not about entirely using self-energy. It's really about it's shifting the patterns of energy. The utility wants you to use energy more so at night, less so during the day. So it's actually using the energy that the utility has, because large power plants, gas turbines and so on, cannot be shut down readily, nor should they be. They become much less efficient. So the utility is trying to create a steady load, a steady generation profile. Unfortunately, the reality is profiles are varying. So it's evening out the extremities of that. So with time of use programs and other things, we're actually not necessarily saying you'll be using less energy from the utility, but you'll be shifting that energy. And that makes the utility happy. The best curve a utility can see is a straight line, right? And that's what a microgrid can help. So you're still consuming energy from the utility, but for example, you may be charging up your batteries at night, rather than everybody coming in at around 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., or so on, 6 p.m., and creating a surge of demand for the utility, which causes havoc for the utility. So it is actually, you may not even have any renewables on your microgrid. Let that sink in. You can create a microgrid without any renewables at all. But what you do have is a dispatchable control mechanism and energy storage, let's say. And I'm trying to bring that up right here. There we go. In order to even out this curve to get a straight line. So here's in a case where you don't have any renewables, let's say. So you store that energy at night. You're still consuming from the energy from the utility, but at a cheaper cost. And you dispatch it during the day in a controlled fashion. That is the key merit. So microgrid is not necessarily about self-consumption with renewables all the time, but it is about evening out the playing field.
Have you built any arrays that are Cat 5?
No.
Is it possible?
I'd have to look into that.
Street?
Yeah, let me address that. We're working on a project with Hillsborough County right now that is Cat 5 rated.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Are the costs?
It's a ground mounted unit.
Okay.
System, yeah.
Are the costs of that significant, the delta?
It increases the structural cost for sure. Yeah, it's a cost implication that you'd have to factor into the rate of return, but it is a cost implication. And again, depends on what other things you're doing with buildings and how you're protecting facilities. But I think as Sheridan indicated, I think anything we'd want to look at in this arena would be, you would need to factor in a hurricane rating for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Councilmember Beckman.
So if we're talking about, not to drag this out forever, but if we're talking about solar arrays, I'm not thinking that Pinellas County, the most densely populated with the price of housing and land sky high, we're not necessarily looking at big fields of arrays here in this county. We're looking at them to advocate for Duke or at the state level for other parts of the state, right? For our city, it's really to put it on the most advantageous buildings, locations first, right? And transition that way. Okay. And so just so we're clear, when I have that solar on my roof and I'm using it in my townhome and plugging in my car, I have the maximum efficiency because that electricity is not going anywhere else. The only place the electricity I generate goes is back to Duke when I don't use it all at once during the day. Well, actually, I think I was told it goes to my neighbors close by me, so it doesn't get shipped somewhere far away and then back to the neighbors.
It goes through the meter, so from the utility perspective, you are just feeding back the surplus in the utility, and those specific electrons may probably end up going to your neighbor, yes. Yeah, but it's left your premises.
And then the other thing is when we talk about payback, especially with a Category 5 police station or something, I think people need to understand that residents, businesses, and governments pay different prices per kilowatt of energy, and so the payback's a little different, right?
Correct. Kilowatt hour, yeah, exactly. And also there are different rate structures in terms of energy is not charged at the same time, depending on when it's being used. You could have a time of use structure. Not always. Sometimes a client may feel they'll just be on a standard tariff, a general tariff, let's say, what they call. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Rohn. Appreciate you coming out this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.